Well, thanks very much for all your questions that have come in, and we want to grill the members of Parliament to make sure that we're getting the right ones and that they hear what our grievances are. So, Nick Monsour, I really appreciate you coming and give us your time. I know it's valuable to this run up to the election.
I appreciate it.
But I'd like to grill you. We've got a lot of
Absolutely.
questions here from our members, and it all centres around jobs. They're concerned that they've got a lot of children that leave uni and can't get a job. They're concerned that I think the figures are 6 people in 100 in Queensland don't have a job. So what will you be doing to help the people they know get a job?
Well, that's a very important question because in Moreton, in this community, jobs is actually the number one issue. So it's jobs and economic stability, and that's why our plan federally and what we want to translate into Moreton is about jobs and growth. Now, we talk about 6% as the state average. Well, in Moreton, we have youth unemployment even higher than that. Now, Moreton is a very multicultural, a very diverse electorate. It's the second most multicultural in the country, the first most and the most multicultural in the state, and the surrounding areas very strong, which also means that it has a high proportion of small business. And small business is the number one employer. So about 70% of all the working population of Moreton work in and around small business. So if small business is suffering, then employment is suffering. So in order to to stimulate jobs, we've got to stimulate the economy. Okay, government doesn't create jobs. Government creates the opportunity through developing the economy and putting the enablers, putting the circumstances in place for small, medium and large business, but predominantly small business, to actually take advantage and grow. That will create jobs.
How many small businesses are there in Queensland?
Well, there's just over 400,000, so you're talking about,
Significant.
effectively 10% of the population equates to small business. Now, when I say 10% of the population, it's actually a larger, majority of the working population that work in small business. But if we look at that proportion locally, once again, Moreton, not just because of the multicultural aspect, but also the diversity in terms of our commercial, industrial and business centres in Moreton, it actually has one of the highest proportions of small business per capita. There are over almost 25,000 small businesses in Moreton.
Wow.
Yes, and they are the big employer and they are the big driver of economic development.
Well, our members in Moreton obviously need a job to be able to raise a loan to get investment property because they don't want to be on a pension, so we want to help the taxpayer by not being on the pension. And so job security is a big one for them. We were looking at infrastructure spend was going to be the big saviour for Queensland. That seems to have been stalled. So what are the other alternatives if you don't go to small business?
Well, look, infrastructure is very important. It is a key issue. It's not the number one issue, but still a key issue in Moreton. The state government doesn't have any money. The state government is not investing in infrastructure, which is one of the stimuli for economic development and jobs. The federal government is investing in infrastructure. That is a key deliverable. We've outlined 200 million for the Oxley to Darra upgrade of the Ipswich motorway. We're looking at other infrastructure projects in Moreton, but that's not going to be the only driving factor. We need to stimulate the number one employer, which is small business. Small business and the domestic investors, so mums and dad investors, that's what's going to drive this economy. So we need to give small business the tax and business reforms needed to do what they do well. Develop, grow their business, which in turn will develop and grow jobs, which in turn will develop and grow the economy and this community.
Well, having been a small business for most of my life, I know that the beauty of a small business is you can get $1 in your hand today, but you can spend it tomorrow and invest it.
Yes.
A big business would take 12 months to turn around and decide what to do with that dollar in the hand. Our members in Moreton will really be looking for you to boost employment in there, give them job security so that they can continue to help their children into property or themselves into property, because we don't want to get on the pension. $325 a week, it's just not good enough. And your treasurer, by the way, believes that the average property investor has 2 or 3 properties and that's it. But I can assure you and him that they need 7 properties to avoid the pension. Anything less than that, and they're going to be thrown back on a part pension, and have the horrors of sudden surprise big outlays for carpets and curtains and new kitchens and stuff.
Absolutely.
So really, to be independent of the pension, they should be looking at 7 or 8 properties, which brings us to negative gearing.
Mm-hmm.
Because our concern is, and the concern from our members in Moreton is with the change that Labor want, they're going to get 600,000 property investors each year, but say no, you've only got to invest in the 60,000 new dwellings that are produced every year for property investors. How are we going to get 600,000 buyers into a 60,000 market without skyrocketing prices? I'm concerned.
Well, and you should be concerned, and everyone out there should be concerned, because this isn't just about new properties either. This will affect every property, and this won't just affect investors. This will affect every mum and dad out there that owns a property or aspires to own a property. Because if you change that negative gearing, that will affect investors, that will affect rentals, that will affect property values. It won't just be certain property values, it won't just be certain investors. I mean, Labor think that this is only targeted at those with 8 to 10 properties plus. It's not. It's everyone that owns a property, whether it's your own dwelling or an investment property. This will affect all values. And anyone that owns a property today will have a decreased value tomorrow.
Questions we got back from our members in Moreton was that to get their sons or daughters into their first home and get the first home by a benefit of 15,000, it's got to be a new property. So once Labor's law comes in that only investors can only buy new property, these first home buyers are going to be competing now with 600,000 people for the 60,000 properties that are new. And that's right. It's going to be a disaster.
Well, it will. It will be. It's going to be a tragedy in many ways because one, yes, it will inflate because competition does affect pricing. So yes, new dwellings will go up, but the moment, unlike previously when you buy a property and you have an appreciating asset, in effect it'll be like buying a car and you'll have a depreciating asset because the moment you buy a new dwelling, well, you can't sell it. Without a decreased value because you're talking about a completely different market because investors won't want existing dwellings because they can't negative gear them. Under Labor you won't be able to negative gear unless it's a new property. So you're right, you're narrowing that market, you're pushing and inflating those prices, but if you have a first homeowner, they better want to stay there because they're not going to be able to move because they're not going to be able to sell it. You're going to depress the market. And you're going to depress the market across everyone who currently owns a property, but also everyone who buys a property, new or existing, because a new dwelling is only eligible for negative gearing whilst you, the first buyer of that property, owns it. You want to sell it, it's no longer an investment opportunity.
We find in the club that education is what people really need to get wealthy and independent of the pension. I put out a research paper to our members when this was all mooted to go out and get their existing home valued, go to the bank and increase the line of credit against that property. The reason I did that is if Labor gets in and takes 600,000 people who normally would be competing to buy used properties out of that market, it's a huge number of people moving from the market. That must sag the values and prices, and we've seen that in mining towns.
Yes.
When the buyers disappeared from the mining towns, down went the prices, as we predicted. So we're saying that if this negative gearing law comes in, your home's going to be worth less than it is now, so get it valued now, increase your line of credit, because I think it's going to take 10 years for this market to adjust to the lack of buyers in the used market. And when the club came in, we were getting 7% rent returns. Now, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, because there's so many investors in the market now, which is good for tenants because the rents have come down, and now according to the ABS it's 4.2% rent return. So you take those investors out of that second-hand market, tenants will have fewer and fewer second-hand properties to go to, they'll bid the rents back up to 7% again. So there's going to be all those distortions in the market, so we're concerned with our members get all this information in advance to protect themselves.
Well, yes, because anything like this is not a natural market turn or influence. what you find is an unnatural injection or change in the market. We saw that in the States with the subprime market. We saw that, during the GFC, so to speak. If you force property values down, where people have, existed in that market, and yes, changes do occur, but it's not like an overnight bubble burst, and it's not actually the realm of government to be forcing that change upon a market. You must allow a market to influence itself. That way investors can make informed decisions. People who are aspiring to a better, stronger financial future can actually continue to work towards that progressively. But if government comes in and makes policy that suddenly turns that investment opportunity into a loss. Now, negative gearing is about making your losses tax deductible, or at least tax affordable. That's what negative gearing is. It's not positive gearing. So you're already making a loss, but you have a tax break to incentivise so that you can then gain in terms of your capital gains and your ultimate return, both short term, mid and long term, because property is that solid investment. Bricks and mortar.
You're talking an expert here. I love that. I love property. Slightly different subject is that Turnbull started about 2 months ago at the Westpac Bank, hitting them for taking advantage of their monopoly. The attention seems to have gone away from that approach that he was having there, and the Labor Party have come up with the idea that they'll have a royal commission into the bank. Our members have got a mortgage. Our members have been crucified by the banking monopoly because they've moved their loans from interest only to principal interest. So their repayments have gone up 40%. They can't raise the rents 40%. And that's money that's coming out of their pocket that they normally would use to spend and create jobs. The Labor Party are going to have an inquiry into this. After they get in, it'll take 18 months to set up the inquiry, so there's no relief for 2.5 years before the next election comes around anyway. What prospect has homeowners got and investors got with this banking monopoly? It seems to me that Turnbull started out on the right foot, but it seems to have died since then. What is the solution, do you think, to this, and is the Labor inquiry in terms of references being sorted out to such an extent that it would help?
Well, I don't believe it will, and I don't believe that Malcolm has stepped away from it. I think other things have sort of taken the limelight, because the first thing we've got to do is ensure that we have the foundations of a solid economy and a plan going forward. So the 6-point plan that will actually deliver on that economic stability, jobs and growth. We haven't stepped back from reviewing the banking sector and continually reviewing what it does and what we need to do. And the best thing we can do in the banking and finance sector, and that's part of my background, is make sure that we have strong, adequate, broad competition, and ensuring that we have both legislation and rules and also influence within the banking sector, the banking finance sector, to ensure that one, consumers, customers, people are not taken advantage of unduly, but also that we have good, strong competition that will actually allow for market forces to influence that rate. I do not believe a Royal Commission into banking is going to solve it, because you're talking about something that not only is 2, 3, possibly plus years away, but also no point fixing or trying to fix or force the banking industry down one path if you're taking the economy down another, and you've already taken, taken the guts out of property investment and property values.
Well, we haven't seen the terms of reference of this Labor inquiry anyway to see that it's going to break up this monopoly. And our members quite regularly get the chart that shows the profit margin of our banking monopoly at the moment now compared to the profit margin they had over the last 20 years. And it's the highest now, despite the fact that rates are low. I'm hoping that Turnbull will continue his investigation of this as he started with Westpac, it just seems to have gone on the back burner, and that's where our members are looking for a bit of action, because we've got APRA sitting there, and I believe the banks are breaching Section 46, and APRA is the policeman to come in and help our members with this wide profit gouging at the wrong time. And of course, APRA is stoking the fire by encouraging the banks to get their tier capital up, not from their shareholders, which every other business would have to, but from increasing profit margins. So I know it's early in the election and it's going to heat up and there's going to be more policies coming through, but can our members hope to see some more attention given to the profit margin of the banks and the setup that there's only the big four?
Yeah, and look, we will look into that. That is, as I said, that has not gone off the table. It is not on the back burner. It's just that other issues, policies and so forth have taken over in the meantime. But only taken over in the sense that they are the topic of conversation in this part of the election cycle. Because it is very much around making sure we have the foundation, the enablers for economic growth, stability and jobs. That's going to be able to position us, enable us to drive the economy forward. We are not going to forget about the review of the banking system, and always ensure that adequate, effective competition and rules are in place, but also that customers, the people, aren't being taken advantage of and price gouging and so forth. That will be on the agenda. That is something that will be continuously looked at. It doesn't require a royal commission that'll take 2-3 years to achieve, well, we don't know what.
Well, prior to Rudd, our members had about 32 viable banks that we could go to get loans, and as a result, the profit margin was way down. Now it's really just the big five. Macquarie's in the mix there somewhere, and Rudd gave each of them $25 billion, I think, when we had the North American financial crisis. There was no global financial crisis. They used that money to gobble up the opposition. What action are the Liberals going to do to put that wrong right? Is there any move at all to alter this situation?
Well, I can't go into any detail on that. It's something that, as I said, we will continue to review.
You're aware of the problem?
Yes, I am. And we are, as a government, the Malcolm Turnbull team is aware of it, and it is something that we do need to do something about. But I don't think going in with a sledgehammer or a threat of a sledgehammer is the answer, because all that does is, in effect, destroy industry. We saw that with the carbon tax. We saw that with the super profits tax. We saw that with the beef industry. Labor goes in with a sledgehammer and inadvertently or advertently destroys industry, destroys markets. That is not what we do, and that is not healthy for Australian industry. We need to, yes, protect the consumer, protect the investor, and give them reasonable assurances that they will be able to invest effectively without being gouged or disadvantaged. We need to make sure the watchdogs have a strong bite, not just a bark. Well, that's what we are going to do. We are going to make sure that the watchdogs actually have the capability and the capacity to deal with it, and to open up markets, open them up for competition. That's what's going to stimulate growth, jobs and affordable investment and finance.
Well, that's what I'd like to see Turnbull doing more of, saying we've got we've got the ACCC and we've got APRA that can take action to bring competition back into the banking sector, but we don't see any movement down that way at the moment. Another sleeper and common question I get from our members, they don't like super. They know from the intergeneration report that even if you do super all your life to 2050, you'll live for 5 years on your super, then you'll be back on the pension. So they know it doesn't work. What they do know is that property works. Can they use their super to pay down their mortgage? And wouldn't Australia be a more stable country if it was less dependent on overseas funds to fund the mortgage market, if we could use our super to fund the mortgage market? Is there any movement in the Liberals for this end?
Well, at this stage, we need to, progressively develop that detail. I think we should explore all these opportunities. I consider myself very progressive when it comes to economic and fiscal policy, because I think we need to look at everything. We need to encourage people to invest. And I look at super the way I look at any business or investment approach. You need to have that balanced and broad application. If you just rely on superannuation, that may not be enough. If you just, well, there you go. I mean, I do this in business and I do it in practice. I look at various strategies, both investment and other, to actually build up, that wealth, that financial portfolio, whether it be in shares, whether it be in property, whether it be in superannuation. I think you've got to have a broad-based approach to it, but you've got to allow people, you've got to have the flexibility so that they can do that.
But at the moment,
my father always, no, I know, but this is something that we need to look at in the future. Now, what that means in terms of superannuation, I know that self-funded retirees and self-funded superannuation is a different story, and then you've got those who go into investment funds. We need to look at these and look at ways that we can open up opportunities for broader investment, whether that be through other means or direct means in terms of your personal income. I think it's important that we allow people to invest in their future, to actually have a broad portfolio that is weatherproof, so to speak. Because everything goes in cycles. Property goes in cycles.
Yes.
The market goes in cycles, as in the investment market, whether it be blue chip stock or others. But most investments go into cycles. So the ability to actually move and adjust your investments, I think, is an important thing.
One of the big things about the Property Club is that we educate our members, and one of the faults I found with superannuation in your own self-managed super fund is if you put a property in there, it's locked in, you can't access the wealth. You've actually got to sell the whole property to access the wealth. So you might have bought it for 400,000, it's now worth 800,000, but you can't access that 400,000. The law says you've got to sell the whole property and then see someone else own it. So when it doubles to 1.6 million, you don't own it. And all you've got is that 400,000, which eventually you're going to spend, and you hand it back on the pension.
So you're suggesting using the equity, so
yes,
accumulate equity to reinvest. Now, are you suggesting that reinvest into?
So I'm looking at low doc loans in retirement is a good, safe investment. If you borrow 10% of the annual increase, 90% still there. If you borrow up to 60% of the loan portfolio, that's a very safe lend. But it would probably give you $100,000 to live on very well, spend, create jobs in the community and have a good lifestyle, and be totally free of the pension, because that property will continue to rise and you'll continue to be ineligible for a pension. But that's not possible at the moment. And I've been with the government now for 7 years trying to get an answer on why can't we have a low doc loan to self-funded retirees who are relying on safe property. I can't give a good answer.
Okay, well, it's a very interesting question. It's certainly one I'd like to explore, because that sounds like the type of structure we should be looking at. Now, I don't have an answer for you right now. I think it's something that we should absolutely look at, because, and this is, in order to be economically progressive, we need to look at those sorts of ideas. We need to explore them. As I said, don't have an answer today, but I think it's something worth exploring.
It's got to be a budget deficit, because the fewer people on the dole, or the fewer people on pensions, it's got to be better for the budget deficit. And I
see the benefit of it, because you are also talking about absolutely utilising the equity in a fixed property, so a fixed asset, to be able to once again fund your lifestyle, fund your retirement. But the asset remains. So, the risk in terms of risk against collateral, well, it seems to sort of be a reasonable idea. Why wouldn't we explore it?
The first answer I had from the previous treasurer was, why don't you just sell a part of the property? And as if you could take the front door down to the supermarket and put the front door through and get your groceries. And of course you can't do that.
No.
They're thinking in terms of shares, and of course if you've got a lot of BHP shares, you can sell enough to live on this
You
year.
can sell a portion of a parcel, but it's very difficult unless. And also, there's an inherent risk involved in that if you're talking about a third party as opposed to a member of your family, or. But even then, there's always challenges in part ownership.
Yeah, you betcha. Can't recommend it.
Unless you're selling that proportion to your children, so that they can gain part of an asset. But otherwise, there's certain inherent risks to that because you're talking about, you're right. You can't then break down a property into parcels.
And then
It's
you can
all
think
or
about
nothing in
your house.
terms of it exists, but
Yeah.
is there a structure that we can use fiscally to actually allow for that reinvestment?
I can't find it, but if you can,
Okay.
I'd be very, very
No,
grateful.
I'd be happy to look into it because, as I said, this forms part of my professional background as well, and that's what I want to take into government. That sense of I'm a small business operator. I also come from a large corporate. I have a military background. I was an infantry officer in the Army Reserve, and I've dealt with banking, finance, and investments. So this is something that I'd like to take into policy determination and delivery in government.
Well, I can promise my members in Morton that I'll hound you. When you're in office, and I'll hound you.
And I hope you do. I hope you do, because I think that's the reason we're there.
Yeah. I really appreciate your time.
No, absolutely, Carl. Thank you.
Monsour for Morton, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin, I've got a couple.